everyone, and welcome to another edition, the second edition of the AI Native DevCon. And this is one of two editions that we're going to be doing this year. So this is our spring edition. So we have a bunch of wonderful things to share with you at this conference today. But just first of all, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who's joining us today from all around the world. And we hope this is going to be a fun session for you, a fun conference for you. And we really encourage you to share, contribute, and engage with each other, because we feel the side track, the hallway track, as we often call it at a conference, is just as important as the main stage is where we talk to the speakers. So let me bring my screen on, and I want to share with you a few things, first of all, about AI Native DevCon, and then talk with some of our other hosts at the conference here as well. So first of all, what's coming up? Well, we've got some amazing content for you on 4 tracks. We have a bunch of live demos on 1 track, and we absolutely have a ton of stuff that you won't want to miss. And even if you did miss, don't forget, everything is recorded here at this session, at this conference, and everything will be available on YouTube afterwards. So if you have trouble guessing, trying to work out which track you want to go to, don't worry, try and work out which track you want to see live and ask questions of live, and then you can always review the other sessions after the conference. So how do we get around? Well, we've got this wonderful application, this web app that you're going to be watching this conference through, or you can also look at this directly through YouTube. Why don't we go straight to the application here itself, and I'll click through. So from here, you have already registered, which is why you see that, oh look, we've got 6 seconds before this starts. That's funny. We've got this stage up here where you can choose. If you click through on one of these, you can choose which to go to. In fact, what happens if I click Keynote? Let's see what happens. We go to the Keynote stage, where I can start seeing all the chat as well as the actual keynote itself. I can also see what's coming up on the various stages if I click schedule here, and you can see across the tracks we have AI today, AI tomorrow, some of the things happening in between, the keynotes, and of course the tool in actions track as well. If you wanted to see more information about the speakers, you can click on there and go ahead and, let's say, Guy Pojourney, who's going to be giving our first keynote. You can see who Guy Pojourney is, more information about that speaker, and various links as well. A couple of other things that I do want to mention. AI Native DevCon is actually part of a broader, a wider community. For example, I can click on podcast here, and this will take me to the podcast page of the AI Native Dev site. From here, you can see a bunch of podcasts, which myself and Guy Pojourney, our first speaker, also both host. For example, Olivier Pamel, who is the CEO and co-founder of Datadog, and many, many others, amazing speakers, some of which actually, Annie Vella, are going to be presenting here today. We also have an amazing news section where we can provide you with the latest and greatest news from around the community, in this case, keeping up to date with Claude Code, Lovable, Windsurf, Junie, and many, many more. We also have a landscape, which will actually feature quite heavily in the tools and actions track that we'll come on to in just a moment. But from here, this is really a catalog and categorization of all the AI dev tools in our spaces, in these SDLC and development spaces. If you see something that's missing, go ahead and click on submit, and that will allow you to be able to submit either via pull request or a Google form many of the AI dev tools which you enjoy, which perhaps we're missing. So this is a community effort to keep this up to date. And of course, as I mentioned, AI DevCon 2025 is also a part of that community. Okay, so we have a number of amazing sessions up here today. We have Guy Pojourney, who's going to be kicking off, talking about this wonderful progression and evolution from vibe coding, how we get to the next stage as with AI Native Dev as a craft. And then actually closing the conference off in the keynote stage, which is this stage, is Matt Billman. And Matt is the co-founder and CEO of Netlify, talking about the agent experience of how we can do AI development with coding agents. So very, very cool things for that. For AI today, we actually have a few people who are going to be running each of the tracks. My track is AI today, so we have 6 sessions in between the keynotes. Couple that I'll pull out. I'm actually really a big fan of Drew Knox. So Drew's actually also at Tesla, but he's going to be talking about code-centric eval-first development. Eval is such an important part of AI models and how we actually use them in development. It's really going to be an important session, in my opinion. I'm also really interested in Annie's session about, am I still a software engineer if I don't write the code? Annie, for those who don't know, also wrote a blog recently about just this, and it's a really in-depth blog about where software development is taking us in future and what it means for the role of a software developer in that future. We also have AI Tomorrow track, and I'm not going to be the hosting that. I can't be in multiple places. For AI Tomorrow, I'll bring a couple of speakers in. We have Dion Almer. Dion, how are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Oh, we can't quite hear you there. Oh, we can. Sorry.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, good.
So, Dion, what are the highlights of
tomorrow? So, yeah, really excited about this track. You know, we have lots of practical talks on agents. We're going to be talking about self-driving infrastructure, security in the world of LLMs, where you don't have predictability in the same way. We've got some kind of real talk on what our jobs are going to be like as developers, you know, with some contrarian opinions in there too, which is going to be really fun. And we're going to be learning from someone who was vibe coding for hours with the infamous Steve Yegi, which I think is going to be you know, really interesting too. And then finishing up, my old partner in crime, Ben Galbraith, who works at Tesla with us as well, is going to be having a nice chat with Des from Intercom about their really practical real-world journey that they've had with AI and where they're at with agents too. So I think there's just a ton of stuff that we can learn about kind of the bleeding edge of tomorrow with AI that you can even bring to your today.
That's awesome. So yeah, you'll be running the AI Tomorrow track, and we have a third track which will be running throughout the day. And Baptiste, or Baptiste rather, you're going to be running tools, AI tools in action. Welcome, Baptiste.
Hi, Simon. Hi, everyone. Super happy to be all together today. Like, it's going to be definitely a very, very fun one. So yes, tools in action. I think this is going to be like the more practical side of the conference. We're definitely very excited to show you a couple of creators and founders showing like what's happening, what's the latest best practices, whether it is in agentic workflows, whether it is how to deal with hallucinations, and all that fun stuff. So really looking forward to seeing you there if you want to get your little dose of practicality, I guess.
Awesome. And Bap, you're actually going to be working twice as hard as both me and Dion. In fact, just as hard as me and Dion put together, because you actually have 15-minute sessions rather than 30-minute sessions. So me, just imagine when you're giving every other one of those sessions, me and Dion will be kicking back, probably just enjoying a drink and just chilling in the background. But you're doing the real work here, Bap.
No, it's all pleasure. So no work here.
Awesome. So Dion and Bat will look after you both in the AI Tomorrow and AI Tools in Action. So I'll let you both go over to your respective tracks. And so what else is there? Well, there's Discord, and I very, very much encourage you to join Discord. If we can just drop a link perhaps into the chat here for Discord. You can also see that Discord link at the top of your Hey Summit. Now, if you click on that, you can have exactly the same chat in the 4 various channels in Discord. We have Keynote AI today, we have AI Tomorrow and Tools in Action, all after AIMCon, which is the name of those, the pre for those channels. Now, if you write into those channels, all those messages will also be pushed into StreamYard, so you will see those messages across there. We'll also be giving some prizes away. Maybe it's some T-shirts, maybe it's some vouchers, some coffee vouchers and things like that, for the best interactions that we see and questions in and around the session. So it's not the most, it's not the silliest, it's the best questions, the most intriguing questions and interactions that we see. So please do get engaged and interact with both the speaker and each other across that. Okay, I have to also say a massive thank you to Tessel, who's really helping build this community with others. Dosu, Kodo, Run When, AnyShift, StackPack, Codurance, All Hand, Baz, and Equal Experts. So without all of our wonderful friends, we wouldn't have many of the speakers as well as the community that we have. So a big thank you to all of our sponsors. And that's everything I have to say on that. We're going to jump in and actually kick off with the first session, which is the keynote. And this keynote is going to be given by Guy Pojourney, and he's going to be talking about this evolution of how we go from vibe coding to that next more reliable step of AI native dev. So without ado, let me introduce Guy Pojourney. And a big hello, Guy.
Hello,
How are you
Simon.
doing?
So exciting here. Sort of second iteration, new and improved.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to introduce Guy Pojourney, a friend of many years, but a founder of Tessel, and obviously a massive community figure for many years, going back from security all the way through to now AI. But key is dev tooling, everything dev tooling throughout that. So Guy, what are you going to be talking about today?
I will talk about kind of the journey we've been doing as a software ecosystem on it, going from super fun, super magical, somewhat unreliable sort of AI dev tools and vibe coding today to evolving this as a craft. Yeah, lots of to say.
It's the craft which I find lovely because it's so different, so contrasting to the vibe coding aspect. So Guy Po, with that, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Simon. And I just want to echo Simon's thank you for everyone for joining us today. You know, it's really exciting to run this as a second time, as a recurring event, a community resource of it. And I want to say an extra thank you to all you amazing people who are joining us a second time. Hopefully that means we've done something right in the previous one. There are many hundreds of you. And I hope that you find this one even better, even more compelling as we go through. So as Simon pointed out, I am Guy Pojourney. I am the founder and CEO here at Tessel. And I'm here to talk about kind of the journey, again, what we've been doing as we sort of embrace AI into software development. So we've gone a long way in a fairly short period of time, right? If you harken back, not long, maybe 3 years ago, the only AI dev tool that had kind of any real adoption was GitHub Copilot. And if you fast forward to today, we have thousands, potentially tens of thousands of AI dev tools. In fact, so many of them that we launched the AI native dev landscape at the end of March. And we tried to kind of help curate a bunch of these tools out there so people can find them and understand them. We curated about 150 tools in less than 2 months. We got a bunch of contributions on it. We're at nearly 300 now, probably still have less than 10% of the tools out there. And so with this many tools, we now have some patterns to learn from. We can see an evolution. Maybe we can chart a trajectory. And so I want to talk a little bit about this journey that we've been on and kind of finish off understanding what are the limitations to kind of break through to the next level and what can we do about it. So to plot that, or to sort of help us understand the journey, I'm going to plot it on this sort of 2x2 chart that I wrote about, I think in September of last year. It's meant to help us understand AI tools as a whole, not just dev, and it uses 2 axes. One is an axis of trust. So how much do I need to trust that a tool works to be able for it to be useful for me? So it goes from attended to autonomous. And the second is an axis of change. How much do I need to change the way I work to be able to embrace this tool? So let's look at a couple of non-dev examples just to understand it. For instance, when you think about self-driving cars, you might think that automatic parking or staying in the lane, that is something that doesn't change the way I work. I'm driving, I'm in the same seat on it, and it's highly attended. I can, and in fact, I'm expected to supervise, and if something goes wrong, grab the wheel or not, never take my hands off the wheel and take over. While if you think, for instance, about robo-taxis and Waymo and the likes, they also don't require a lot of change. I'm pulling up an app, I'm ordering a taxi, I walk into a car or get into a car, get driven, get off. But the fact that there's no driver there, but it's an algorithm, requires a lot of trust. I'm entrusting it with my life. If you think about, and both of those, they're sort of journeys towards that sort of top right destination of the sort of full self-driving car future. And if you think about the change axis, you might think about text to video, for instance, right? It's a new form of creation that we have. We can create images and videos with text. And unlike the previous systems, it's entirely different. We're creating videos with no cameras, and things that were cheap or were expensive before are now cheap, and vice versa. And it really opens up a very disruptive change of operations to be able to tap the power of AI. And if you've been kind of tracking the
Ballerina
ballerina
cappuccina,
cappuccina Italian
mi,
brain
mi,
rot
mi,
sort of on TikTok,
è la
user
moglie
now,
di Cappuccino
you can see that sort
Assassino
of leads to some
e ama la
interesting
musica.
And so I'm going to use this sort of 2x2 to chart the progress of AI dev tools as they've gone through, hoping it is useful. And I will use kind of the size of the dot to be able to express adoption level. So let's start with coding assistants. Coding assistants are kind of the OG tool and still the most widely used AI dev tools. They start from this notion of code completion, really the epitome of kind of low change, low trust, because we're already used to IntelliSense, to completion of function names and such. And so just the snippets of code that get presented to us are bigger, are better, are smarter. And we opt in to those by hitting tab. And so fully attended and very much, very, very little change. And no surprise, they get adopted substantially. And still today, very clearly, the most dominant, most actively used form of AI dev tool. Next to that, we've had the ChatGPT craze. And as a society, we learned how to use ChatGPT for all sorts of things, including in coding, asking for things like, hey, create this function for me, maybe in Python, to use Stripe to charge for a transaction. And ChatGPT will bring in knowledge from about what Stripe's API looks like, what is charging a transaction, knowledge about Python, and create codes together. And that saves a ton of time. Of course, when you use code like that, you don't understand, what you've done. And so if you encounter an error, you don't really know what to do, which led to another pattern of behavior of taking that error and just pasting it back into ChatGPT and say, hey, what should I do now? This problem occurred. And so this pattern led to a very natural evolution of bringing that chat into the IDE environment and being able to just sort of ask those questions in the IDE, exchanging context. And it really introduced this notion of context management. So I can now sort of select a piece of code instead of copy pasting it and saying, hey, create unit tests for this, right? Or ask a question about it. These are the core use cases for sort of coding assistants on it. And as we started using them, we started encountering some failures. And the primary failures are really when it kind of makes things up. This notion of hallucinations that really start eroding the trust of, I really want to do this, but sometimes it's just crazy. The most evident example of that was really around APIs. This is one example from sort of a public pull request that happens over the time. You ask ChatGPT, or I think this is Copilot, for help doing something, and it proposes this get spectral line list function. Really nice, really elegant, and also entirely non-existent. Like there is no function called that. It's a made-up API, and that can get really frustrating. And again, can erode trust of, if you got this wrong, what did you get wrong about algorithms, about functionality in my code? I want to share one of my favorite examples here. This is April 24, so more than a year ago now. Copilot in the Tesla team created this comment. It says, to do, Kevin, this is a hack to make TypeScript happy, which is already kind of entertaining, but it's more entertaining when you realize there is nobody named Kevin on the team. There was nobody named Kevin on the team. Really unclear where that came up, where Copilot came up with it. And at this point, I don't know that we can hire a Kevin, because since this comment, Kevin has become the ultimate scapegoat for us whenever something goes wrong. So a lot of power and a lot of sort of questions about trust. Let's plot these on the map. Code completion, clearly bottom left, big circle, wide adoption, really little change, little trust required. Chat-based code gen, also little trust. You choose to copy and paste something else. However, a little bit of change. We're used to Googling for a Quora or Stack Overflow question, but the interactive model, the breadth of it, the specificity of it, it is a change that people have kind of come to embrace. So it's a pretty big circle already. Coding assistants have continued to improve. They added many things. A lot of them are doubling down on the same concepts. And so Cursor pioneered this notion of predictive edits. You just sort of you modify one part of the code, and it would predict you also want to change another part. And so just hit tab and continue onwards across lines, and then over time across files. When you introduce chat into this mix, you combine them again and you ask for a modification. Instead of changing code in one spot, it should suggest a whole bunch of changes and creates something that feels like a pull request flow inside your browser, and it's just you and the AI, so you can move pretty quickly, but something we're pretty familiar with. And we accept it with, in theory, supervision. We'll talk about that more. So these bigger and bigger edits translated or went hand in hand with growing awareness of the code you are editing. And so we've seen coding assistants introduce better and better understanding of your code base. It went from no understanding of your code base as just a generic developer to looking at the open tabs around it for ad hoc context, to allowing you to control the context window and say, hey, include these files, to our current expectations as, really LLM context windows have grown, to really have it just figure it out. Definitely around the project that I'm on, and many tools today try to index entire massive enterprise code bases. And this sort of deeper knowledge manifests in everything the coding assistant does. Code completions should get better and represent your organization. Chat queries allow us to start inquiring questions, like asking questions about our own big code base that previously maybe we would have had to sort of search a fair bit to find the answer to. And then when we create new assets, new projects, new tests and such, this institutional knowledge basically kicks in to create them. It did introduce an interesting problem of sort of garbage in, garbage out. Inside your existing code base, there are patterns you want to repeat and patterns you do not want to repeat. And that's been a challenge as we've learned kind of how to tune it, that actually the industry is still dealing with. So as we've been using more and more, depending more and more on the system's knowledge, the trust problem also started exploding. And the evolution of that sort of acute API mistake or hallucination before evolved actually into a real security concern called slop squatting. In this case, this is a research about it. Slop squatting was actually sort of coined even beforehand. But in this research, they took a whole pile of prompts and tests, and they found out that a fifth of the recommended packages were non-existent on it. That's higher than what I've sort of anecdotally seen, but it is a common occurrence. And then they've also seen that 43% of the time, the same hallucinated packages were suggested every time. And what that means is an attacker can try a bunch of prompts, see what the LLM hallucinates, libraries that don't exist, and then actually go off and create those libraries and have them be malicious. And so when the LLM goes on to hallucinate, because it's not based on public knowledge, the use of a library, that library will now get pulled in and be malicious. And it's very hard for a user to notice the fact that it's a legitimately named, but not actually the popular package that they were intending for. So let's plot these enhancements. They're enhancements, they're later, it makes sense they're used less. I would say multi-file edits, still low on the change track. It is basically pull request in your browser, but it is higher in trust because you are depending on the system, on the sort of coding assistant to pick the right files, right? When you think about it, if they consistently don't pick the right files, they become useless to you. You'd stop using it altogether. So you have to trust they'll pick the right files often. Code-based inquiries, similarly, you're asking a question about your code base. You really need to trust that that answer is correct. But still, for the most part, you can go vet it. And I think a little bit more change than chat. We didn't have such handy queries. Internal docs oftentimes fall out of date very quickly. And so it is new and we're learning it. But still, for the most part, very much working in your workflow, no big change required, and generally highly attended. Which, if we continue to go down that rabbit hole, leads us to vibe coding. So vibe coding is a term that, as many of you know, has been coined by Andrei Karpathy, and he tweeted this sort of pattern of behavior he spotted in himself, where he basically said, I asked Cursor for stuff, and I don't really read the diffs anymore. I just kind of accept it. When I get an error message, I just sort of throw it, copy-paste it back and forth, and just sort of let it run. And when that happens, the code grows beyond his usual comprehension. So he acknowledges that once he starts doing this, he's actually no longer a good reviewer because he doesn't actually understand the code that is modified. And he even sometimes encounters dead ends where he needs to either sort of stop or do something funky to get over it. And he says, that's fine. It's not too bad for a throwaway weekend project. But it's not designed, it's not meant for something that you might do professionally. But it is very, very tempting. Vibe coding in this pattern of behavior was made possible because of Cursor's kind of accept all button at the bottom. That was really the leader. Again, now it's in many other tools. And it really kind of introduced an easy way of sort of saying, yeah, this all looks good with minimal or literally zero vetting. In fact, Cursor doubled down on it, and they created this notion of the YOLO mode. I was kind of saddened to see them rename this to auto run mode. It's a much more professional name, but like I liked YOLO better. And in this case, the accept all is basically built in. You know, they just go off and accept all the changes automatically. And in kind of Cursor's defense here, I don't know if it's defense, but like the system does acknowledge that it's taking on more responsibility. And when you put it in YOLO mode, it does run a few more tests, and you can give it some guidance about what to do there. But still, heavy delegation to the LLM's decisions. And it's worth noting that YOLO mode, I think it was pioneered by Cursor, but it's not exclusive to it. Here's an example of Claude Code, which has this auto accept edits option on it, and other tools kind of lean into this, going into agentic behavior we'll talk about in a sec. What could go wrong if you do this? Everything. Everything can go wrong. This is a zero guarantee environment. There's no pretense really of it just working or giving you any assurances. This is, again, it's not bad for a weekend project. Clearly it's being used for more than that, but everything can go wrong. You really have to trust it fairly substantially. So plotting it on the chart, I would say, first of all, adoption is still very low. I would actually say that the adoption in professional software development is higher than maybe it should be, because it's just oh so tempting. And we'll see if we pay the kind of the price for that over time with such software. But it is still nowhere near the sizes of the other features we described. And I'd also put it higher on the trust vector, but not so high. The reason for that is that while you are delegating coding, you're still expected to vet the product. So even Karpathy, as he uses it, he does check if the product works. If you contrast that to a self-driving car, or maybe like an intercom support agent that gives answers automatically to its customers, in that case, there is no verification. And so there's still a long way to go in terms of trust. You're trusting its coding, but you're not necessarily trusting its correctness. Now, of course, vibe coding continued past this, and there's a new breed of products, Lovable, Bolt, V0, Base44, there's a bunch of others that are what I called prompt-centric dev tools. And they give you access to the code, but the products are really designed to say you provide a prompt and then you see the product. And it is an attended product, but it's an attended product in which you review the product, not the code. And you really are only supposed to engage with the code when there's a failure and you're trying to do something very specific. And indeed, it drew many users that are not necessarily developers, and many use cases that are not professional software development. These prompt-centric apps have mostly shined in things that are disposable, whether they are prototypes or ad hoc systems. Someone might have an idea, they would create it in a ridiculously short amount of time. Amazing, I've done it many times now, it's super fun. You go, you use it. Maybe this is a kind of quiz night app for your friends. Maybe it's a prototype of a new feature, right? Maybe it's a workshop tool that you're using. And when you're done, you chuck it in the bin. And these types of disposable apps, you don't care as much about their longevity, about their correctness. They are small, so you can vet and review all of their changes on it. And so it works very well for those use cases. However, when you try to grow them past that, you start getting into sort of experiences that the volatility, it's not so fun. Let's sort of see this video is probably like a really good way to demonstrate that.
Make a multiplayer flight simulator that's going to make me rich. See, this is all just hype. Engineers are not going anywhere. You can't just one-shot a flight simulator. It's magic. Engineers are going away soon. Now make the planes blue. No, make it realistic like before. More realistic. More realistic. More realistic.
This video, I've seen it, 1,000 times. I don't know, many times. It cracks me up every time. I love the pleading voice. I wonder if LLM voice interpretation will understand. I really mean it, when I'm pleading like this. So these are magical experiences. These vibe coding environments, like I feel that every time, no matter how many times I do it. And they're also so unpredictable. And so plotting them on the map, I basically put them in a different color. I'd say this is really about toy dev adoption level. It is not professional software development. They have no notion of long-term ownership, no notion of maintenance, no notion of even correctness. And at the moment of this, they don't really pretend to give you that. And so in that sense, it's just not professional software development, but I don't want to diminish the level of adoption and value they provide, just for a different use case. So I plotted them in a slightly different color in our path. But they do lead us to the obvious kind of destination here, which is agentic development. And this is really, in a way, the attempt to bring this type of like powerful behavior into the world of professional development. And as LLMs got better and as capabilities like MCP, for instance, made tool access for agents, more and more accessible, just like making agents more and more powerful, it starts thinking of like, maybe this is more in the realm of possible. And many solutions are trying to build in that path. I see two kind of primary big slots of autonomous agentic development happening. The first one is agentic-ish, and this is cases in which you have some narrow intelligence that can spot a problem and fix the problem and then propose that. So you see this maybe with security issues, for instance, Snake finding a vulnerability, fixing it, and proposing that to the user, or CodeFlash does that with performance. It's kind of similar when you think about tests or docs, like something that is narrow, fairly independent, but eventually the acceptance of those changes into your application, that is still attended. And so it's, there's some autonomy, but the workflow is still outside of accepting it and running with it. So I'd say it's agentic, but it's sort of not really autonomous. On the flip side, you have these sort of fully agentic development systems. And these really say, hey, I can do something very broad. I can expand on requirements. I can figure out the SDLC. I can figure out where to deploy it and get it deployed and fix issues on it. They're very powerful. They've gotten a lot better than when they were launched. This kind of category is kind of probably best exemplified with Devin. They were the ones that sort of teed it up, and oftentimes they think about a Devin on it with Cognition Labs. So definitely very useful. It's still in that broad system. There are many degrees of freedom, and it's been hard to accept it into a professional sort of software development setting and enterprises. However, many enterprises do start using it, typically for narrower use cases. So they might do something similar to the previous example, or generate tests, or generate docs, generate something that can still be reviewed, can still be attended, or that has a smaller blast radius if it got something wrong. Very, very promising, still mostly a future. So as we plot them on our chart, I would say the narrow use cases, they show up over here. They're still tiny compared to all the ones that we talked about. It's still a nascent use case. However, it's getting some adoption on it. Typically, when you talk about a Devin or such being used in enterprises, my understanding is it's mostly that use cases. The really true broad use case, it's definitely in the top right kind of AI native future quadrant. It is not really properly adopted today. So I only kind of scratched the surface in a bunch of tools here, but I think these are like the primary paths of it. I encourage you to check out the AI native dev landscape, see a whole bunch of other amazing tools, and we'll show many of them in the tools track today, from product supporting product management and requirements to test, to documentation, document generation, to DevOps, to many others. So what you might have noticed as I go through it is the key repetition is this notion of a need for review. And the systems are getting better and better, and they do bigger and bigger things, typically correctly, but they still can't quite vouch for that, and therefore they require you to review. And I don't think reviews are here for the win, and I want to make the case about why that is. First, reviews get less attention. And as the article says, attention is all you need. Really, we need that attention. When we read a piece of code or content, whatever it is, we give it less attention than when we've written it. That's just a psychological fact. And so things like a slight performance issue, like in the example here, or a security issue in which you need to identify the absence of a security control. It's always harder to identify the absence of something. It's easy to miss. They're far more likely to miss. And there starts to come out, like there's new data that starts to come out that sort of supports this. It's all still very nascent, but also psychologically, it's quite obvious. And the more content you have to review, the less attention you have to spend on every one of those pieces. And so imagine taking that accept all and going not from like 2 files and 31 lines of code changes to 2,000 files and 13,000 lines of code changed. It's really unfeasible. Like you're effectively not reviewing in that mode. And so it really limits the scale of change that a task that requires a review would be able to do. Maybe pulling on a thread that Karpathy opened as well, if you've been using this for a few months and you actually at this point haven't written almost any of the code and you get a piece of code to review, are you even able to review it? I think not, and I found it funny that actually Cursor, when cornered, actually agrees. This is a report from someone about a problem in Cursor where he complains that Cursor, when the user tries to get Cursor to continue writing code, it says, I cannot generate code for you. Looking at the end, it says, you should develop the logic yourself. This ensures you understand the system and can maintain it properly. This was a user error. He kind of clicked the wrong button, got this message off. It clearly Cursor will continue to write code for you. But I found it funny because it's true. If you didn't write the code, you can't really maintain it. And so reviewing doesn't scale in scope over time. It just does not scale. And it really explodes when you start thinking about maintenance. Can you really imagine that your job as a developer is to review every time there's a dependency upgrade, every time there's an API change, every time, like, basically you have this sort of infinite list of constant changes. This would be terrible. It'll be humans as the bottleneck, and it would eliminate all the productivity gains we get from accelerating coding by trading them for reviewing. And the last point, which is maybe the most important, is that reviewing is just not fun, right? Creation is fun. Coding is fun. Reviewing is not. And what we want AI to do is take away the toil, the non-fun part. And if we become full-time reviewers, I don't think that's a destination we want. I want to touch this sort of notion of YOLO, right? So it's like, this is, hey, why don't we just sort of skip the reviews? It's fine. They will typically get it right. This is hard. When you think about software as it grows, the multiplications of probabilities, like how many times you deployed the software, multiplied by how many pieces of software are there and changes that have occurred, even a 0.01% likelihood of change really can explode. And the problem is that AI is not accountable for those mistakes. Humans are, right? Corporations are. And so if you wanted to just kind of YOLO and trust it and, what the heck, the problem is you're going to be held accountable to it. And you have to think about whether your trust in that is high enough that you're willing to accept the outcomes. And I think society-wise, we'll also get to the point where we're asked, at what point does trusting AI become negligent, right? If a self-driving car runs over a person and the corporation behind it says, well, we delegated the decision to the AI and we thought it was good and it works 99.99% of the time, at what point does someone say, well, that's not okay, you needed to have some safety controls, and delegating to AI is deemed a negligent action? What about a software bug that took down a critical system? I don't know what the thresholds are, but accountability is a real topic when we think about trust. So I think as an ecosystem, it's worth saying that we're at a point in which we're ready for a commitment. We need AI development tools that are able to make some commitments about what it is that they create, despite they themselves being stochastic entities. Let's maybe think a little bit about intelligence and collaboration. So societies are built on trust, right? We have different entities, different people. We make commitments to one another. We deliver on those commitments, and therefore we build trust, right? You go to the grocer, they commit that food is fresh. You go to, you get some currency and foreign exchange, and they commit that the currency will hold. Granted, a bit dubious these days on it, but that's the intent of trust there, right? That the plane is safe. And we use these commitments as they get delivered on again and again and again. They build trust that they will happen again and again. And we penalize those who do not. And similarly, organizations are built on trust, right? Different developers agree on division of responsibilities in API, and different dev teams do that. Or, dev and the business side of it will talk about, fulfilling business needs on it. And of course, importantly, users engage with a corporation and they put their trust on it because the corporation is committed to keeping your data safe, to keeping the airplanes safe, to keeping the prices low. And so the way out, I think, of this sort of limit, to be able to break through that sort of ceiling here of attendance to autonomous, we need a mechanism as a community that allows us to go from human reviews to something that is more of a structured commitment. And I'd like to give a couple of lenses on this for us to consider. I don't yet have a solution on it. Frankly, we're working on some of this in TESOL, but I think it's broader than that. And just to think directionally, what is it that we should have in our systems? I think there are two types of commitments. The first type is a product commitment. This is committing to this is a commitment around what is being built. And so there would always be a checkout button. You would always have a way to export your data. You would always be able to use the standard algorithm to, convert some numbers, some mathematical numbers. And you want to capture those requirements in a spec and you want to be able to find a way to hard commit to them with some tests or verifications. And we think that that's at the core of being able to scale software, because you have different pieces of software, and for them to depend on one another, they have to commit to functionality, to interfaces, to be able to join together. And so this is about what is built. The second type of commitment is around how it is built. We want to say, I will commit to it always being tested for security issues. I will commit to this path of long-term maintenance of it, to the update mechanism, to auditability. And this is key in general for building trust with users. It's true for regulatory and kind of compliance needs of it. And over time, it is true for, it is necessary, once again, for collaborations, because commitment about functionality without commitment about quality are a bit of a dead end. A slightly different lens is commitment boundaries. And so there are commitments between a human developer and the AI. This is the primary thing we talked about here. I'm building a system. How do I get the AI to work to my commitments? That in turn allows the development team to commit to things to the organization. We'll be on time, on budget. We will be compliant with so-and-so. And then the organization can go off and commit to the user. And these commitment boundaries don't just need to exist. We also need to think about how do we communicate to them? What is the mechanism of conveying what are you committing to and what are you not? And to close off, I want to talk about the two paths we can take as an ecosystem. So I see sort of two paths of evolution. One is the sort of big brain path. It's a path in which there's sort of a big system, it sucks up all the information, and it just sort of gets it more and more and more correctly. And then it does use tools and systems around it, but they're extensions. They're like a Chrome extension or a Slack app, or they're just helpers. All the power is concentrated in these sort of 1, 2, 3 big platforms. The platform you use, you get better and better. And I think that's a bit of a sad path, because it doesn't leave room for these different innovators to grow and to thrive. The other path is one of an ecosystem of collaborators that commit to one another on interfaces, on functionality, on quality. And in that case, different tool providers, different systems can be extra good at a specific domain, whether it's through data or experience or whatever it may be, whether it's test generation or doc generation versus code generation, whether it is specific stacks or business functionality, they can build competence. And as consumers of them, we can choose how we want to mix and match them. At Tessel, we believe in an open ecosystem, and we think that requires a means of creating software with the magic of AI that enables commitment. And we are driving towards this path. And my question to you is, are you ready to commit to it? That's it for me. Thank you.
Awesome. Big thank you to Gaipo, and yeah, very interesting in I guess the path that we've come on. And what's very interesting is the path that's still to go on, right, Guy?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working on sort of building the pieces, but I think many of these are meta pieces. Like just like a lot of these tools, they have strengths and weaknesses. We need to think about how to kind of bring forward this balance, the slider between predictable, committed software and software that is adaptable and kind of leans on the intelligence of AI.
Awesome. Well, Gaipo, thank you so much for jumping in on the keynote. And I know you've got a session a little bit later with a fireside chat with Danny Allen. So for those wanting to hear more from Guy, make sure you tune in to the AI Tomorrow chat on the schedule for the fireside chat. Guy, for now, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. So what's next? Well, I'm sure you enjoyed that. So I won't need to say I hope you enjoyed that. I know you enjoyed that. Great session with Guy Pojourney, as always. But now you need to jump to one of the next tracks. You have AI today, whereby we're talking about building retrievable code base memory model. You can also go to AI Tomorrow, where Itamar Friedman is going to be talking about code completion to multi-agent coding workflows. And joining back on AI, tools in action is what's hot, what's here to stay with the AI native tooling landscape, as well as Anton Arapov talking about how you can play with agentic workflows or AI assistants with Junie and the JetBrains AI assistant. So pick a track and jump over to that now.